You hear me?
What's going on, everybody? I'm getting like the light, slow claps here. I'm gonna.
Everybody's getting ready.
Did we mention we're giving out free comic books the entire time we do this discussion?
That's right.
No, I'm kidding, by the way.
I think they're just prepping for Top Golf.
Well, they're just waiting for the 4:30. And we go on before the announcement of a $10,000 comic giveaway. So I feel like everyone's like waiting for that to happen. So we'll try to be concise and quick. But yeah. But hey, pleasure, my friend. I wanted to start off quickly because you were here earlier talking to Reggie, and we're going to go over your personal journey and how you got to where you are. And I was taken aback in a very positive way. And I said this earlier, we've talked on social media and whatnot. The way that you are navigating everything with IDW and the changes and the way that you're describing and talking about it, I just want to give you kudos because it's something that I think a lot of people can learn from. The maturity and the positiveness that you're bringing to it. It's not really a question, but I just feel like it's been impressive to watch, and so.
No, I appreciate it, and if anything, I think a lot of companies could probably learn from what IDW is doing, especially internally, which is being transparent. You know, it's if there's a lot of mystery to something, and the people who are staying and the people who are leaving don't understand why, you know, then it becomes easy to create rumors and lies and innuendo. In this case, they've been totally upfront. They've shown numbers, they've explained it to us, and that's to IDW's credit. You know, and again, my situation is very different because of the talent side of things for me. So I can only speak for myself, but my feeling is this could have been something that was far worse in so many different ways. And it's bad enough as it is, just because people lose their jobs and a company has to downsize, but they've handled it really well. So, and I'm saying that from the inside. You know, outside people are going to say what they're going to say. They always do. It's just how the world is, especially with the internet. And so the reality is they've been very, very fair, very open, and in my case, very giving as far as keeping me in the fold as much as they can.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, we will move on, but I just wanted to say again, the way you're handling it, I think it's beyond impressive. So I want to really quickly. It's been an amazing day.
Yeah, it's been fun.
I'm always interested in hearing about, I think a lot of people have connections to, and you've done some iconic runs, obviously Turtles we're going to talk about in a minute. Any like incredible stories from fans that are coming up? Because I mean, you're such an approachable person as well. And so I feel like there's like always a plethora of like stories that you get that resonate with fans. Any past convention stories or any stories just even just today, like speaking to fans?
You know what, honestly, the thing that I like to watch, I mean, I love when people come up to me and people say so many nice things, but I just feel like I look at it like this. People will say, oh, I love your turtles, but it's our turtles. It's not my turtles, it's all of our turtles. If there's turtles don't exist, if people aren't buying them, aren't reading them, aren't watching them, we just happen to be lucky enough to create them. So I've always felt like it's not mine, I'm just with you guys. This is just my part of it. Everybody plays a part. Just like at a comic book company, I always say, people focus on the writers, creators, the artists. We get our names on the cover, and that's cool. And I'm not going to say it's not a neat job. It is. It's a wonderful job. But I don't get my name on the cover of a book unless somebody's putting the letters, the balloons on that page. Somebody's setting up print runs. Somebody's making sure accounting is happening. Everybody matters. Everybody. And I think that just kind of goes back to, I always played sports in school. I always liked teamwork. I was in the Marines, the National Guard. I was a military policeman. I've done a lot of stuff that involved camaraderie and teamwork. And I think that's what drew me to comics. Because there was really no plan for me to write comics. But once I got in, I was like, wait, I get this. I know what this is. This isn't just some, if you're Stephen King, you're probably in a room on a typewriter writing a novel, but he also has editors and people that support him. But in comics, that's just exponentially true. Because there's so many people involved in these books. They don't just happen. And it doesn't just happen because somebody has a story idea or somebody can draw really good. It happens because a lot of people come together to make a book. So I always feel like conventions are another example of the bigger team, right? And I will give full credit to my brother from another mother, Kevin Eastman, because if you think I'm approachable, that is the nicest person I've ever met in my life. I love him dearly. And if you ever want to see somebody who's a true professional, who has every right to be a rock star in this world and above everybody, that just go hang out with Kevin Eastman for a while and you'll find out the right way to do it, and so I've just been lucky to be around people like that.
No, stop. luck has a lot to do with it, but I will say, just listen to you again. You think outwardly, you think about other people, you talk about teamwork and things like that. It's just, again, comes back to the nature of you and the person that you are. And I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable here, but it's
like
a
right
very
now,
good thing.
somebody, look, this is true. I wish I knew his name, but somebody showed me how to use a microphone backstage. So I'm not up here unless somebody's helping me. Everybody has something to do. We're all important. Nobody's better than anybody. That's just, and it's just, I don't mean that to sound like I'm some, I don't know, what's the word, Pollyanna or whatever.
Yeah, I know.
It's not, it's just, I believe that. And I think if people felt that way, they would respect each other more, because, and I'm not egoless, I get pride in what I do, but I also know I don't do what I do without other people.
Yeah, well, you're a class act. But I do want to take it. I want to take it back. I'm gonna pull my best was at James Lipton with the stack of the cards, where I want to take it all the way back. I love sharing, especially creators like yourself, their nerd origin story, right? And that's something that we do at Nerd Initiative a lot. And I would love to hear yours. Like, what was the first fandom or character or anything that like grabbed you when you were young that really kind of took hold of you?
So my mom says it was Speed Racer, and she said I was addicted. I don't remember that. I know who Speed Racer is. We actually did work with Speed Racer at IDW, but I don't remember that distinctly. I think if I remember an early fandom, I really liked Godzilla movies, the old Godzilla movies. But what really, I always love to read. I've always loved stories, but what really turned the corner for me as far as what I want to do in my life, in 5th grade, I had a teacher named Mr. Bowman, and Mr. Bowman read The Hobbit to us. And the Tolkien world and just how Mr. Bowman presented it to us just blew me away. It blew me away, and after he read the book to the class, and then he did it throughout the whole year, part of our day, every day was him reading a little bit more of the book. That's when I knew that I wanted to tell stories so people would feel like I felt like, but I knew I really was a nerd because then I had him, he actually became the 5th, 6th grade combination teacher the next year, so I got him again. So not only did I get The Hobbit again, so that like reinforced it. I remember this like it was yesterday. This is when now I can look back on it and go, okay, that's when I went total nerd. He was reading Shogun by James Clavell, which is a book about, feudal Japan. And I remember him saying, there's so many characters in this book, I have to keep little like cards to remember who everybody is. And that would be the thing that you would think would say, like, I'm never gonna read that book, that's overwhelming. And I remember thinking, that's the coolest thing I have ever heard, that you need cards to keep track of all the characters. So I think that's where the shift came for me, and then I wanted to be a writer ever since.
That's amazing. And I think you mentioned earlier when you were talking to Reggie, did you, I think a lot of writers and creators do this, and I would spend an hour just looking at the work from when you were a kid. Did you create your own like comics and do that, or your own stories?
No. My comics experience was my uncle and aunt owned a Marathon gas station in Michigan. I grew up in Michigan, and they had like Richie Rich comics in their lobby. So I remember looking at those comics when I was a kid. I really liked those. I thought that'd be cool to be rich like that and have all that cool stuff. But as far as comics and like some of the mainstream stuff, my cousin's brother-in-law was a big collector. And this was 80s, and we would steal his comics. And he's forgiven us since, but he had some really good comics. So the comic that probably I can remember as far as mainstream superhero comics hitting me the hardest was Chris Claremont's Root Saga. So that was kind of the one that I stole, just we were grabbing whatever we could, and I read it, and I thought, I think Wolverine was pregnant in that story, and I thought, this is great. What is going on here? This is all over the place. And it was like Alien meets, X-Men, and so that's when I knew I liked the genre, but I never really honestly thought beyond story. So I'm not that nerd that like knows who inked what. The biggest nerd I ever met in my life was Gene Simmons from Kiss. I worked with Gene for many years when I first came to IDW. So he's the kind of guy that can tell you, oh, in issue 5 of whatever run, this was the inker, he replaced so-and-so. I wasn't that guy. I couldn't even tell you who wrote what at the time. I just cared about the stories and the characters. It wasn't until later when I got into comics that I started really kind of paying attention to the bigger picture.
Have there been characters or stories or arcs that you've kept as like a creator and then brought up later on or took inspiration from?
Well, obviously with Ronan, Kevin and I have one thing in common. We're huge fanboys for Frank Miller. So Dark Knight Returns was huge for me. But I like the obvious ones like Watchmen and V for Vendetta. I like what Alan Moore does. There's a one run that I always go back to. Like, how you have your comfort food that you go back to? Is Mark Millar did with John Romita Jr. did Enemy of the State. It was a Wolverine run. That's one of my favorite runs that I just always like. I pull that hardcover out all the time and say, oh, I'm gonna read this again. But I like a lot of like the old Batman stuff. But a lot of it was probably Frank Miller, leaning toward Frank Miller. I kind of like that gritty stuff. But you know, there's that's probably the main ones. You know, I pull out a lot of books, and I'm pretty boring, I think, when it comes to that. You know, I don't have a giant collection of things, but I also like a lot of stuff that's happening now. There's a lot of things going on now. I just read one. I was talking to Mitch over there, Mitch Gerard, and he works with Tom King a lot. And I just read the Supergirl one. The girl tomorrow. I can't remember what it's called. It was really good. I mean, I like Tom's stuff a lot, but it was just a kind of a different take on a character. That kind of stuff excites me when somebody takes something that you don't expect and makes it feel like this is how it's supposed to be.
Yeah, Donny Cates has a lot of that.
Donny, yeah. I also like, you know, like what Chip's doing on the Daredevil stuff, and you know, so there's a lot of stuff I like to read now, but I tend to, like I said, I'd probably say my most go-to is Enemy of the State. I don't know why, I just think there's something about that story. I love John Romita, and I like what Mark does, but there's just something about that story. It hits a lot of buttons for me I need sometimes when I just need something to make me get fired up.
That's awesome. And we talk about journeys in past, obviously. I want to hear about your journey into comics. I feel like that's another one, working in comics.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's another one where everyone's journey is unique, and you hear all the stories of, you know, Jerry Conway writing a letter and getting published in Marvel, and that's how he got into. Same thing with, I think it was, maybe not Dan Jurgens, but I love these stories of how these creators, as fans, get to live their dream. How did that happen for you?
You know what? I always had to plan to write the next great American mediocre novel. So I was a prose writer, and that's how I kind of was always. I never thought about comics at all.
It was like Stan Lee, by the way, had that plan also.
Yeah, you know, I thought if I could write a kind of a crappy novel and have my name on it, I'd be happy as hell. But what happened was, I did start writing short stories and getting some published here and published there, and these were just like stories I made up, you know, and then. I had a friend that said, hey, we got this magazine, it's called Cyber Age Adventures. And it was an online zine, 1998, 99, run by a guy named Frank Berdella. I still work with Frank, very talented person, I still work with him. And remained friends since then, and another gentleman named Sean Taylor, who's actually done some work for us at IAW over the years. And they said, oh, we're going to write these short prose stories, superhero stories, just original stuff. You can make up your own characters, you can use some of ours, they were all original. And the funny thing was, we were doing it for free, weekly, with deadlines. It felt like it was like a real job. There was no pay, you know, but it was a great lesson in deadlines. But my favorite thing was I created a character whom now I hope to go back to. I've been wanting to go back to for years. Now maybe because my contract's changing, I think I can do it now. The character, the story I wrote, I submitted to Frank, and he said, look, your writing is fine, but you keep focusing on the powers, you know, because in my mind I was like, well, superheroes, they have powers. He goes, and he goes, it's just not ready yet. He rejected it. I rewrote it. He goes, stop focusing on the powers. He goes, think of it this way: all the powers are part of the setting. They don't matter. We want this character to matter whether they have the powers or not. And it was like something clicked when he told me that. And it seems like simple advice, but it's not always simple to turn that advice around into action. And so I went back, thought about it a little longer, rewrote the story. He goes, this is it. Now I care about the character who just happens to be able to shoot rays out of their hand. And then that's carried me since then. So I, like with Turtles, look, and I always tell this story, I've never been in an alley fighting ninjas with a sword. Not that I remember. There's, you know, maybe during my drinking years in the Marines, maybe I was, I don't remember. But no, I've never fought ninjas.
Someone's gonna come forward now. I have a story. I
don't have any, you know, secret stealth missions, but I have siblings, I have sisters that I've had arguments with that I care about, I have parents that I care about, and I said, so with the Turtles, and I think it's one of the last things, you know, what makes the Turtles so endearing and lasting is, that's what that story is about. They just happen to carry sharp blades and do all these cool things, but that's not what's important. That's just part of their life. What's important is the family, the core of it, and that I think helped me write Turtles for so long because of what Frank told me way back when. Now, to get the comics, Sean, who was at Cyber Age Adventures, said to me one day, hey, a couple of guys and I are going to start this comic book company. We're going to call it Shooting Star Comics. And this was back when Diamond had like a really low threshold, so you could pretty much anything could get into the Diamond catalog. It's changed a lot over the years. And he said, do you have anything that you would want to do as a comic book? And I had an idea, this story called Children of the Grave. Kind of. I'm a big like 80s metal fan. I love rock. I play guitar badly, so you know, but I do play. And I thought, you know, there's a song by Black Sabbath called Children of the Grave. It's kind of inspired this military horror story in my mind. I said, and I was thinking about maybe trying to do it as a screenplay, but maybe it could be a comic. And he goes, oh, well, do you want to do it as a comic? I said, yeah, let's do it as a comic. And my next question was, how do you do a comic? I had no clue, no idea how to write a comic, never even thought about it. And he goes, oh, well, here's one of my scripts. This is how you write a comic book script. This is how you need to look at it. So all I did was I took his script and kind of reverse engineered the formats and wrote the comic. So to this day, my scripts look like Sean Taylor's scripts because that's just how I learned how to do it. And then luckily, you know, I was able to put together a story. There's a site called DeviantArt online. It was Digital Webbing, I think was the name of the site. I found an artist up in Ventura, California named Casey Maloney, young guy.
It's like pre-Fiverr days, I guess.
Yeah,
like, yeah.
Talk about serendipity. The artwork that he was shown, he just won a contest on Digital Webbing, and the theme was Daredevil versus the Turtles. That was the theme, and that was the first thing I saw from him. And I said, I just reached out to him randomly and said, hey, dude, I'm a nobody who's trying to write my first comic. Do you want to do a comic with me? I can maybe pay you like $10 a page, which I was paying out of my tax returns at the time. And he said, yeah. And he and I worked together on many projects since then. And we just did this comic. It was something that we published, kind of self-published, Shooting Star. But the way I got to IDW was, it's always who you know, right timing, I went to a free comic book day in San Diego. The last issue of Children of the Grave had come out. The store owner, and he just passed away recently, rest in peace, Robert. Robert Scott ran the store. He knew me, and he knew Ted Adams, who happened to be there, who was in charge of IDW, and this is like 2006, and it was actually 2005. And then Ted was looking at some comics, and Robert came and goes, hey Ted, this is Tom Waltz. He's the one that does this Children of the Grave comic. And Ted goes, oh yeah, I like this comic. He goes, who's collecting it? And I said, I don't even know what that means. That's how I was so ignorant of what was going on. I go, nobody, that's it. And he goes, we'd like to collect it. Would you like to bring it to IDW? And I said, yeah, of course, if it's new life. He goes, yeah, just come down to the offices. And at that time, there was like 8 employees at IDW, literally 8 in a little office. The office space they had was this is bigger than the office space they had. And it was a place where there was one bathroom in the whole building where you had to take a key that had this like big tire attached to it so nobody would steal it. That's how early it was. And I went in and I started working with Chris Ryle, who was editor-in-chief at the time. And so Chris was helping me, put the book together, and it turns out, guess what? Chris Ryle loves Rat and Iron Maiden and White Snake as much as I do. So we kind of had a personal connection, and that was our personal connection. They collected the book, and I know, sorry, a long story.
No,
what
great.
What ended up happening was, I thought that was it. I thought, okay, I did a comic and it got collected. That's kind of cool. Got to get back to writing that mediocre novel. And one day, I think I got paged, or it was before the phones we have now. And Chris said, hey, guess where I'm going today? I said, where? He goes, Gene Simmons' house. And I said, oh, you jerk. And I thought he was just telling me to tease me. He goes, no, I'm telling you this because it might be important to you later. So I thought, what does that mean? Well, what happened was they went to meet Gene to talk about getting the KISS license. But at the time, the KISS license was at another publisher. I think it was a company called Platinum or something like that. But Gene said, hey, I got these comics I want to do on my own. And so they made a deal with him, but IDW was so small, they didn't have enough people to edit it. And so he said, and I had been in the Marines. Then when I got in the Marines, I worked in defense for many years. I worked with defense companies, a company called Cubic Defense Systems, and then I was working at a company called SAIC that if you go to the airport, if you see Lenovo, that used to be SAIC. They're the ones that make the stuff that the TSA terrorizes you to get your stuff through every day. Yeah. And so anyway, I was working at that company, and I did a lot of computer stuff, and there was stuff I had, was trained to do in the Marines. And he goes, would you be interested in freelance editing these books for us because we need help? And he goes, you could probably write them too if you want, write some of them. And I said, yeah, what the heck? It's something cool to do on the side. I was writing on my own anyway. So, next thing I know, I'm at Gene Simmons' house. That's kind of cool, and we put together this package of comics. And one of the first ones I wrote for Gene was called, of all things, it's called Gene Simmons' Zipper. Now, that sounds bad, but it was actually a story about an alien who was on a planet that was kind of a hive mind planet, and he was trying to find autonomy, and he escapes to Earth. Okay. And the reality was, Gene had just like a high level idea. Gene was awesome to work with, because he said, here's what I want. I want this is the high level. He goes, you fill in the blanks. And the reason I'm calling it Zipper was because he said, he said, I checked, there weren't a lot of comics that start with the letter Z, so they'll stand out. And somehow he's able to copyright Zipper. Somehow, I don't know, it was something, Gene's always thinking in business. And so I put this comic together, and just one thing led to another, and because I had a computer job, I could work remotely. And so, and my boss was cool at my defense company. He's like, hey, as long as the system's running, there's one of those jobs, as long as things are running, nobody cares what you're doing. But when it breaks down, you better be there.
Yeah.
So and IDW agreed, like, hey, come on in, we'll give you a desk and just work here, and you can work on your other job. And then it was one of those things where like, well, since you're here, why don't you edit this? Why don't you do this? And then kind of like where I am now, there came a point where SAIC decided to leave California for Florida. It was just too expensive to keep offices. And I wasn't gonna leave California, but I went to Ted and I said, I'm probably gonna have to stop helping you guys because my next job probably won't let me, do this like IDW or SAIC is letting me do it. And Ted said, you wanna come on full time? We'll figure it out. And so I came on full time, and part of my deal even early on was, well, make sure you're writing some stuff and you're editing some stuff, and I've been there ever since, So that was like earlier I was saying, there comes a time for change and to move on, but I've been there so long since kind of early days that's just the hardest part for me. I think it's breaking the official connection just because you've been part of it so long, but it's time, and I'm completely at peace with it. I've been treated great, but it was a weird journey to get there, and it was all because of Rat, Iron Maiden, and loving hair metal. So I always tell people, you should love hair metal.
So I know we have a couple minutes left because they're doing the big giveaway soon. Mm-hmm. We got to talk about turtles before we wrap, but I'm going to have my Oprah moment right now. As you explain that journey, you just explained, this is a real thing, you do realize that somewhere out there's a writer who's going to hear that journey, much like we've heard the Stanley journeys where he did Fantastic Four 1 and just the perseverance and the luck and everything. Is it a surreal moment to think about that will inspire someone to be the next Tom Waltz down the road, listen to that story?
I hope so. I mean, if I can inspire people to do what they love, then that's a win for me. I just tell people, a lot of people I think get frustrated because they think, oh, I'm not getting published by Marvel, or I'm not getting published by DC, or I'm not getting published, or if I do this, I should be getting paid. And I always tell people, I'm sitting here today, but I'm like a 25-year overnight success. That's exactly how it works. It's not like yesterday I started and here I am today. But I also feel like the journey was fun. I love everybody along the way. I've met so many cool people just today, here, all the people that came up to my table, it's so neat. But I just say, just do what you love. I always explain it this way. People who've seen me talk before have heard this story, but I always say this. We all have radar. You have radar, I have radar, you have a radar, it's an antenna. For some reason, the stories, I don't make it, they're out there, man. I always say, one of my favorite movies is Heat with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. And the scene that always hits me the hardest is when they go to meet the computer guy, and he has all the schematics for this bank that they're going to do the heist on, and then Robert De Niro's looking at these schematics, and he's like, man, you could build the bank with these things, where do you get them? And the computer guy goes, it's out there, man. It's just out there, you just got to know how to grab it. And I go, that's how I feel when I'm writing, because it's out there. There's nothing new under the sun. I just know how, that's my radar. I say my dad is a carpenter, and my dad can view beautiful things. He'll see a piece of wood and go, that's a table. And I'll see a piece of wood and I go, that's firewood, because I don't know what to do with it. My dad does. My daughter's an artist. My wife does these baskets for parties. It blows my mind. I just tell her, you should be selling those things, because she just can see it and organize them. And some people are good with numbers. We all have radar. And I always tell people, if you want to do this writing thing, if you want to do this art thing, just do it. Just do it because you love it. Let everything else take care of itself, because it will. It just will. And if you're worrying about this thing over here, then you're not doing this thing over here. And that's not going to happen for you personally. And then also remember, when you do get here, you don't get here because unless other people are doing their thing to get you there. And I think that's just the key. It's just enjoy your life. There's so much negativity right now. It's getting so old. Everything's offensive, everything's this, everything's bad, it's not. We all know that. Come on, deep down, we know it's a good place to be. Just enjoy your life. Find something you love and do it. And you don't have to be famous or rich.
Yes.
Because who cares, right? Who cares? Just enjoy it every day. And so that's kind of how I approach it. And don't get me wrong, I have my bad days. I have my days where that deadline is screaming. I'm like, what am I thinking? Why am I doing this? But then I remind myself, because this is what I do. And this is what I meant to do, so just keep doing it, and find a way to trudge through it. And know that there are writers who are in that spot who wish they were doing this. Don't forget that. There was a point where I was that person too, hoping I was here. So now I'm here, so appreciate it.
So we got to get a couple last running questions in, so that way I don't get attacked by the audience. Working with Kevin on a story that he'd been holding on to for decades, right? What was that like? And like, again, something that was on ice and shelved, and it just felt like the right time. What was that like to work with the creator of the Turtles on this really kind of, it feels like it was close to his heart, like a really cool idea that was ahead of its time, clearly, because it still resonates now.
Yeah.
What was that experience?
It was like, it was the second round with Kevin that blew my mind. Because the first time I worked with Kevin, I was not, when IDW got the license, I was not part of the editorial team that was going to work on Turtles. I was not planning on being the writer. I was just a guy in the room in editorial meetings cheering him on, because I thought, oh, that's a cool license. This is a cool thing to have. And we had, you know, big writers pitching to us, but for whatever reason, Nickelodeon wasn't seeing what they wanted to see. And then Kevin approached Ted and said he wanted to come back into the Turtles fold. He'd been out of it for a while. And he said, look, I can't write it, but he goes, I'll help plot, and I'll do covers and some artwork. And so once we had Kevin on board, that was a big deal. And he goes, but I'm going to need somebody to write it, a co-writer. And in the meeting, Chris Ryle looked over at me and he said, do you want to write Turtles with Kevin? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, okay, we need a pitch tomorrow. And so the funny thing was, I was already thinking, like, you know, if you're a creator, you're always thinking, what would I do with that thing? So in my mind, the biggest thing that I was thinking about that I did in the ongoing was I wanted them to be reincarnated. So I always wanted that origin to change a little bit. I wanted to kind of have an attachment to feudal Japan and this idea, why would these guys know how to do, you know, martial arts and know all these things? You can't because a rat was in the cage watching a guy learn. You know, I was like, I want to do something a little different. And so I put my idea together. And then they said, oh, Kevin's bringing an idea tomorrow too. And I had never met Kevin at this point. Again, going back to my earlier story, who was I working with for many years? Gene Simmons. I love Gene, but Gene is a rock star. You know, Gene is a larger than life personality. So I just assumed Kevin might be the same way. You know, and with Gene, Gene's the boss. There's no doubt. And so when I found out that the guy who helped create Turtles is bringing a pitch, and I'm gonna like kind of put my pitch next to his, I thought, mine's never going to happen. There's no way. And I just kind of assumed, again, wrong, should never assume. I assumed he was going to be this rock star guy. Kevin comes in, he goes, hey, I read your pitch. He goes, we can do mine later. He goes, this thing is great. He goes, this is going to make fans, excuse my language, he goes, shit purple bricks. Whatever that means. And so from then on I knew, like, we just hit it off and we've been like brothers ever since. You know, we just meshed. I don't know, but I don't say that because I'm special, because Kevin meshes with a lot of people. Kevin's just that kind of guy. But right then I knew, I was like, this is gonna work. But you know, fast forward now, 100 issues later, you know, we told this big story we wanted to tell, and he said to me one day, well, what do you want to do next? And I said, I don't know, do you have any ideas? And he said, well, I got this thing. So Kevin always makes me feel bad because I'm sloppy and I'm messy with like organizing things. Kevin is like everything organized, and he keeps everything. He's got these amazing archives.
Sounds like me and my wife on
He pulls this outline out of his archives. He said, oh, this is idea Peter and I had like in '87. And I read it, and I was right away, I said, we have to do this. But I had that fear again, because guess what? Now it wasn't just Kevin's idea, it was Peter's idea too. So this is like not just me, you know, I kind of have to make Peter happy too. And I to this day, I've never met Peter in person, you know, and not because it just never worked out. But he's always been supportive of what we do. You know, he let us have the Turtles and run with it the way we wanted. But I did kind of have that little fear again. But I realized, and then Kevin goes, well, we're probably gonna have to make some changes. And as soon as he said that, I knew it was gonna be okay again. But the biggest change we had to make was Peter was so smart. Peter is smart. His predictions for the future, because this is a future story from 1987, all happened. Like he goes, there's like if you get the director's cut, the director's cut's coming out, you'll see in there he's describing flip phones perfectly. Oh, we'll have these phones where you can do computer stuff in your pocket. And so I told Kevin, we can't do this because it's kind of like the past. we got to create a whole new future now, because Peter nailed it. He was like Nostradamus. But once we sat down and started working, what was interesting was this was the first time in the process where I realized it's time for me to be Robin and Kevin to be Batman, because this was his story. And it was a hard transition at first, just because you have this muscle memory of what you've been doing for 10 years, and you start to do it the same way. And then Kevin's like, whoa, that's not working for me. And I was thinking, wait, why? It's always worked for you. And then one day it clicked, because this isn't Tom Waltz's Turtles, this is Kevin's Turtles. And once I made that switch, it worked out perfect. And that's when we finished. People don't realize I wrote a whole script for the first issue, Last Ronin, that we threw in the garbage.
Really?
And it was already ballooned and done. And Kevin said, "This is not it. This is not what I wanted." And we had to step back, and I was like going, "Oh."